What does George Washington have to do with the last of the Mohicans? Find out. Hey, welcome into Rob Wright Shaq's Pop Culture, and welcome to the stream. Thank you guys so much for being here. I love the comments already in the chat. That's hilarious. Let's go hide in the cave behind the waterfall. That's fantastic. Lots of fun stuff in the chat. Please keep your comments coming. I love them. Today, we're going to talk about The Last of the Mohicans, the movie from 1992 starring Daniel Day-Lewis. And we're also going to talk about the real-life events of the French and Indian War and how they kind of relate. So if you're a fan of history, movies, or both, you're definitely in the right place. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's explore some of the facts and fiction and how they collided and it came to be in this wonderful movie. We'll say plug it for physical media. The Blu-ray copy is excellent. Or the 4K copy. I don't have the 4K copy. I just have the Blu-ray. And then, of course, I've got the fantastic book that's right here. So let's get started. So we're going to set the stage early here and talk about the French and Indian War first. So let's take a look here. Give me one sec. Okay, let's set the stage with the French and Indian War, shall we? So it lasted from 1754 to 1763. In Europe, it was called the 7 Years' War. And it was actually the first true global war, according to historians, because it was not only fought in the United States and North America, but it was also fought in Europe and even in Asia, also on the seas. So a very interesting war, primarily between the French and the British, but here's kind of what prompted it. So you had English settlers who'd come over from Britain and were settling in the colonies, as many of us know, being from the United States. We know several came over from the colonies, and the British did encourage this. It was a new way to start your life. It was also a way to gain wealth, gain ground. That sort of thing. The French had a different view about it. They wanted their subjects to stay in the kingdom primarily, but they did allow people that could afford to go over to the New World. The French, instead of claiming so many territories, what they did was they formed kind of trading partnerships with many of the native tribes. The British did too, but the French seemed to be really good at that. They primarily focused in on creating that relationship with them. The French were able to establish many of the land areas in Canada versus what's presently the United States, where the British were. And a lot of what happens in the war is the territory along the river line headed to the Great Lakes through the northern states. So that's kind of where it comes out. Darth Wanker has I'm Here for the Scalpings. That's a book I want to add to my collection, but would like to have a nice hardcover. Yeah, I would too. I got that with a collection from my grandfather. And, essentially, basically the fighting is over the forks of the Ohio River and the French stronghold of Fort Duquesne. So one of the things that started the war involved founding a father of our country, George Washington. So in 1754, a young George Washington led a patrol of colonial militia and native allies. They ambushed a French patrol in the Battle of Drummondville Glen. Now, that area is near present-day Pittsburgh, if I'm reading that correctly in my history books and the history sources. So that's very interesting. What happened is they snuck up on this patrol, and apparently it was a diplomatic patrol, and they attacked it, and the attack didn't last very long at all. They captured them, and they captured the French commander, and apparently what happened is the natives disobeyed Washington and went ahead and killed the French commander. And this kind of set off a fire keg in Europe about this action, and it kind of was the prelude to the war. 2104 Dogface says the French and Dutch did a lot of good trading, especially in firearms, metal, and blades, etc., especially in the early 1630s. Yeah, there was a lot of trading with the Dutch, the French, the Native Americans. The British did some trading too, but the British mainly tried to take land and buy land from them. You can read history about all the different settlements that the British bought land from. But basically, this action by George Washington, then a colonel in the militia, started all of this. And let me tell you, the other aspect of this is that, he was just a colonel in there because of this incident. Some say because of this incident is the reason why George Washington was never promoted within the British ranks and given proper command as a general in the British Army because of what happened here that kind of kicked off the French and Indian War. He remained, unable to get that accommodation. Otherwise, he might have been a British general during the time of Revolution. That would have been a bad thing for us. It's interesting. FKHC 2005 says they would just looking for an excuse to go to war at this point. Probably so, because the French and British didn't like each other, and they were trying to gain control of North America. And as Shrubby 1989 rightly points out, the Caribbean was more of a focus for trade. Correct. Rum, tobacco, sugar, spices. The land was territory for the taking. Yes, exactly. Darth Wanker also adds, this is also preempted by the War of the Spanish Succession, was a European great power conflict fought between 1701 and 1714. Yes, that happened right before this. You had a lot going on and a lot of different ways that monarchies were ruling. And it was interesting how land and trade routes were big. Yeah, you're right. Shrubby 1989. They were to keep the French out, not just to start a war. Yes, because part of what I read and what it said was that they wanted to keep the French out of the British territories because they had already had agreements with some of the natives that were in those territories and had the trade markets there and had the trade rights. And they didn't want the French coming in and stealing those trade rights or taking some of the land as well. And, this is kind of the westward expansion. Right now you had just kind of the colonies, and you really didn't go really much further than the Ohio in the Northeast. So this is an interesting time period. So after Washington did this, it kind of led to a few other things. In 1755, British commander Edward Braddock led a few attacks in New York and Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, he was defeated, and he was even killed in those early campaigns. And so there was kind of a stalemate, and really the French and Indians, their Indian allies, were winning, and they were able to establish different colonies. The war officially kicked off in Europe in 1756, but like we see in 1755 and 1754, there was already a powder keg brewing in North America at the time. And then by 1757, which is where the movie comes in, the British were taking heavy losses in this war. Shrubby 1989 says you only need to read the Iroquois Territory Treaty prior to the war to see why the British were so keen to attack the French showing up in Indian Territory. Yeah, the Iroquois were made up of, I believe, 5 different tribes, and they had pretty much a monopoly on a lot of the trades in North America and parts of Canada. and the French were trying to get into that, and the British had a treaty with them as well. Let's see what else. Yeah, Darth Ranker added, I wish there were more period pieces around this time in Prague. Yeah, it's an interesting period. I mean, you had a lot of people that, a lot of settlers, and their struggles to maintain a life and to farm, and you had the British in there that were, a lot of the forts were designed to protect settlers against the not so friendly native tribes. You also had frontiersmen who we're going to talk about in a little bit, who would, trade with the Native Americans and gain their respect. And, a lot of the adventure novels that were written by James Fenimore Cooper, like The Last Mohicans, were about these people. So, like we said, in 1757, The Last Mohicans is set. The British were taking heavy losses. There was a change in Parliament and a change in political philosophy by 1757, 1758 in Britain. And there was a big change in strategy. And so what happened politically there allowed them to change their strategy in North America. They sent a lot more troops to North America, wanting to hold on to those territories, defend their forts, capture French territories. The French weren't as keen to send troops there. They sent some, but they mainly relied on their natives, the native tribes, to help them out. But they wanted to maintain their force in Europe because they didn't want France to get captured. And like I said, their political structure relied more on their subjects staying in France rather than their subjects living over in North America. So that was part of it. So eventually the British gained the upper hand, and it helped them to win the war. It officially ended in 1763 with the Treaty of Paris. But in that, and as you will see a little bit in the movie, there's some seeds of the revolution that kind of come up in the French and Indian War, particularly, George Washington not getting a commission, even though he fought many of the battles, knew a lot of the terrain, did a lot of the grunt work for Great Britain during the French and Indian War. You had settlers who were called up into militia, and we see some of that social political type of stuff in the movie that sows some seeds for the American Revolution. And then eventually what happens with that is the taxation of goods and services as well. And Shrubby 1989 adds, indeed, Lord Pitt was instrumental on turning British fortunes in the 7 Years' War across the board. Yes, he was very, very much part of that. So did you guys already know about George Washington and the key role that he played in the French and Indian War? Let me know in the comments below, or hey, leave comment on the chat if you're watching later. I'd love to have that. By the way, folks, YouTube has changed their algorithm. I'm trying to get monetized here, and I need all the watch hours I can. So if you could not only watch, but also when we're done here, leave some kind of comment in the chat. Tell me if you knew about Washington, or if that's of interest to you. Also, anything else you want to leave in the chat about history, let me know. I'm all for it. Like I said, I'm not a historian, but I love history, and I'm sure you do too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Hey, let's transition. Who on earth are the Mohicans? What on earth is this tribe? What do they do? Where do they come from? Let's find out. So the Mohicans are the heart of the story. And spoiler alert, well, this is the last of the Mohicans. The Mohican tribe is still around today. It was not the last of Mohicans. This is a work of fiction, and he used the Mohican tribe to really represent the native people and the fact that that tribe at the time was scarce in numbers. But they basically, just so you know, spoiler alert, the Mohican tribe eventually, the remainder of the Mohican tribe migrated to present-day Wisconsin. They were kind of pushed out, and that's where that tribe sits today. And they're much larger than they were at the time that James Fenimore Cooper was writing this novel. The book was written in, oh gosh, 18, gosh, give me a sec here. 1826. Sorry, 1826 is when it was written. So let's see. Let me look at the chat here. I'm aware about the attack on Fort Ticonderoga and the attack on the Ohio Valley. Many YouTube history channels have covered Washington's part in the war. Yes, thank goodness, because that's interesting aspect. Yes, the book was written in 1826. All right, so the Mohican tribe, originally they were living off of what's now the Hudson River Valley and in western New England. They're an eastern Angloquan tribe related to the Lenape. So interesting. I don't know. I'm not familiar with all the tribes that were in the Northeast at that time. There were several, but they were mainly one of the bigger ones at the time. By the late 1600s, the conflict with the Mohawk tribe pushed many Mohicans into Massachusetts around Stockbridge. Later, they relocated again, this time to Wisconsin, where their descendants still live today. The book's title, Last of the Mohicans, is fictional. There was no single Last of Mohican, but Cooper used their story as a symbol of fading Native American tribes in the face of colonial expansion. So that's part of it. It's just interesting to look and see and hear about some of these tribes. Now, some of these tribes were very interesting. We mentioned the Mohawk tribe. The Mohawk tribe was a very influential tribe. They traded a lot with the French and the British, and they would play off each other as well. They controlled a lot of the fur trade. They had 75% control of it because they were hunting and trapping for the actual fur, and then they would sell to both French and British. So Mohawk tribe was very, very dominant with their land and with their trading. The Hurons were a big tribe, and they're the big antagonist in this movie, and they were mainly allied with the French. The Iroquois did dominate the military. Like I said, the Iroquois were composed of like 5 different tribes, and they had an allegiance to the British. This is interesting, and you'll find out when we get into talking about the characters and some of the historical characters that they're based on. This had some consequences later on in the American Revolution as well. Let's see. 1826, post-Napoleonic Wars and the Louisiana Purchase. So, yeah, that's very poignant time in the U.S. Yes, definitely it is. Then 2104 Dogface says, so many tribes and the Mohawks were attacking everywhere and everyone in the early days. Yes, they were. That's why they were so dominant with the fur trade as well. FKHC 2005 says there are about 3,000, I believe, Mohicans left. 2104 Dogface says 20 minutes from my house was a local tribe's forfeited war camp, and the Mohawk attacked it, burning it down in the Connecticut River. Oh wow, that's interesting. Yeah, a lot of fascinating history with the different wars among the tribes in that area. It's just it's very interesting to see and hear about that. It's the way that these people lived off the land and how they kind of adapted is part of this story as well. One of the great things that we're going to get into is just their fighting and use of not only knives and tomahawks, but also the Native Americans started to use conventional weapons during the time. They were trading with the French and the British and gaining rifles and powder to hunt and to use in war as soldiers in the war as well. So it's very interesting history, definitely unique and historical. There are many different Native American tribes throughout the United States that have an amazing, interesting culture and history to them all their own. Each tribe was different, so it's really interesting. And Yes, 104 Dogface says yes. That started in the mid 1600s. Yes, the trading and changing the tactics, buying weapons and those type of things. So, just incredibly fascinating. So, let's get into the characters. Let's meet some of the characters and find out where history and fiction kind of mix here. So, who's your favorite character in this movie or in the book? Leave a comment, or leave some comments if you're watching this later. I'd love to hear who your favorite character is. So, a couple of responses. Hey, who did you know about George Washington? Who's your favorite character? Let's dive into some of these characters really quick here, and then we'll look at some slides and talk about the movie. So, Hawkeye. Hawkeye is an interesting character. He's the main character of the story. Nathaniel Natty Bumppo, or Nathaniel Poe in the film. He is fictional, and James Fenimore Cooper did write a series of books about this type of character. It's called the Leather series, and it's basically an adventurer like him who was a hunter trapper who had friendly relations with the native tribes. And he wrote, I believe, either 6 or 7 novels based upon this type of character. The Leather Stocking Tales is what they're called. They're actually inspired by a real frontiersman. His name is Nathaniel Shipman, and Nathaniel Shipman basically knew a lot of the native tribes, traded a lot with them. And he was a hunter, tracker, gatherer. He was one of those that would, be friendly with them, hunt with them, learn their customs. He was similar to what Hawkeye was. Shipman also did live amongst the settlers as well. And one of the interesting facts when we get into the Revolutionary War here, as we go through from the French and Indian War, he fought on the side of the British in the French and Indian War with his native allies. But when we got to the Revolutionary War, he refused to fight because he didn't want to fight against his native friends. 2104 Dogface says the native warriors tended to have more firearms than the English militia companies during the King's Philip's War, 1675 to 1678. Yes. And hello to Snorterpupus Cuber. How are you? Glad you're here today. Leave any comments that you might have about the French and Indian War as well. It's interesting to see how James Fenimore Cooper based it on the character. So anyway, Shipman refused to fight in the American Revolution. He was actually kicked out of his town, tarred and feathered, and he ended up leaving where he was in upper state New York and eventually made his way to Cooperstown. So Cooperstown, if it doesn't have a familiar ring to it, you'll note it for a couple of reasons. Number one, the one that we always associate it with is it's where the Baseball Hall of Fame is today. But Cooperstown was actually founded by James Fenimore Cooper's grandfather and father. So he ended up there, and James Fenimore Cooper met him, and that's where he drew inspiration from his stories with the Indians. So very interesting stuff. Shrubby 1989 says Colonel Monroe, he might have been a R word in the book movie, but his military defiance of Fort Henry and the tactics he used eventually helped push the French back out of the territory. Yes, indeed. Darth Wanker asks, how many got introduced to the character Hawkeye from the TV show MASH, which led me to the books? Right there with you, yes. Hawkeye Pierce, who is named after Hawkeye from The Last of the Mohicans. Love MASH, great TV series. Miss that show. Snorter Poop with Cuber. I read quite a bit about North American history. That was always one that interests me. Yes, definitely. And if you've got anything to share, Snorter Poop with Cuber, feel free to in the chat. I'm definitely not a historian, so I welcome any and all input. So let's go through some more characters. We just talked about Hawkeye and how he's based on a real person, which is kind of cool. The next one is Chingachgook. He's the father of the Uncas, and he is the adopted father of Hawkeye. Um, this guy is phenomenal in the movie. I mean, he has the firearms, but he also has this incredible axe like weapon that he just goes to town. And we'll see those scenes in a minute here. I mean, wow, what a cool guy. And the fact that he adopted a white man was not uncommon for some of the tribes at that time when they raided and they're young, that were impressionable, that could be of use. They would adopt them, which is interesting. Snorter Popescu Burr says the French and Indian War was part of a larger war, a wide war, the 7 Years' War. Yes, it was. Yep, we did mention that a little bit earlier. It was great. An interesting war because it Asia, Europe, and North America. So it was one of the first kind of world wars. Another character is Chingachgook's son, Uncas, who's the brother to Hawkeye. Now, the interesting thing about him is that he was based on an actual real Mohican chief. But the historical Uncas lived about a century earlier in the 1600s. And there's a lot about him that was passed down over the tribe and throughout the years. And James Fenimore Cooper may have heard a few stories about Uncas, and that's why he used his name as one of the people. It's interesting to hear about that and to understand the names of these characters and how they played in there. All right, let's talk about the Monroes. So you got Cora and Alice Monroe, who are the daughters of the Lieutenant Colonel George Monroe in the book, but they're fictional. They're not real. He didn't really have two daughters named Cora and Alice. Colonel Monroe is based on the real commander of Fort William McHenry. And basically, he kind of lives up to the way that he is. I mean, he really was commander at Fort William Henry. He really was a lieutenant colonel. And as was mentioned in the chat, he really did have a big role in French and Indian War, pushing the French back out of British territory. It was very key person. Now, the Last of the Mohicans take some liberties with his character in the events, and we see that he dies in there. He didn't actually die, and we'll talk about the history as we talk about the movie coming up. Let's see. 2104 Dogface says Captain Church out of Plymouth, Massachusetts, started in the Red Kings Rebellion using praying Indians in his company. Praying Indians in his company would lead Ranger tactics. Yeah, interesting stuff. And we're going to get into some of the tactics because it's interesting to hear about some of the tactics they used. The War of Spanish Succession was fought basically because the Spanish Habsburgs kept it in the family, as they say. Yeah, it's interesting how many civil wars are fought within the family of royals fighting. Next character we're going to talk about is the main villain of the film, Magua. He was a scout from the Huron tribe, and he was a traitor. You see him guiding the good guys at the beginning, but then he turns traitor, but not without reason. He actually had a good reason, and we're going to talk about that as we tell the story. Another couple of characters here. General Montcalm, who's a real French general who led campaigns like the siege of Fort Oswego. He also attacked this other fort that we're going to talk about here. And he was a real general in the French army. And it was interesting, his orders and what he was assigned to do. General Webb was a real general, really historical one. Major Haywood, who's also in this, is not. Haywood is fictionalized, and he's used as kind of a beginning love interest for Cora and used to help further her character along. But General Webb was actually the British general. He oversaw the defense of New York, and basically what his job was to hold the line while the British Army sailed up the St. Lawrence to try and capture Quebec at the time. So that's what he was trying to do. So he was a mystery man and in Dances with Wolves as well. Oh, I don't know who you're talking about, Darth Wanker. I don't know which of the actors you're talking about. I think there was one or two that overlapped on this, but anyway, yeah, that's General Webb and Major Haywood. So let's talk a little bit more about the film, and we'll get into some of the slides. So let me bring up some of the slides, and forgive me, I don't have all the things I need to really make the slides a little bit bigger, a little bit better on this. But yeah, the actor from Magua, oh my gosh, that guy's great, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So yes, Last of the Mohicans. It was directed by Michael Mann, and it was his first film. And wow, he just did an outstanding job with this movie. So interesting thing about this movie. Do you guys know where it was shot? Anybody in the chat know where this movie was filmed? So it takes place in New York, but it was not shot there. It was actually shot in the forests of North Carolina. So visiting Fort William McHenry, they play this movie in the evenings inside the fort. Yeah, I imagine they do. Shot in Cook County, wasn't it? Not New York. Nope. Yep, Appalachia area. Yes. Yeah, it was shot in North Carolina. And the reason why it was shot in North Carolina is North Carolina had a little bit more rich, lush forests and landscapes that were similar to the 1750s New York. So very interesting. You can kind of see some of that in the picture here. You see some of the settlers, which is what makes it remarkable. So he was inspired. Michael Mann was inspired by the 1936 version of Last of the Mohicans, and what he wanted to do is bring a new, fresh take to the story. We already talked about it being based on A Noble Frontier, and we talked about some of the characters, but Daniel Day-Lewis and his involvement. Now, Daniel Day-Lewis is one of the best actors, I think, out there. He's very much what's known as a method actor. And a method actor, essentially, for their roles, they will encompass themselves entirely into that character. So, in a sense, they aren't just playing. They do everything they can to become the actual character, which is interesting. Snorter Post Cubier says there's a street in Alexandria, Virginia called Braddock Street, named for Major General Braddock, famous for the defeat of his expedition in 1755. Yep, exactly. So, to give you an idea, Daniel Day-Lewis basically took on Daniel Boone as an inspiration for the character. He actually learned survival training with the Army, and he was assigned to a special units group in Alabama. And basically, they taught him how to use all kinds of military weapons and survive out on the land. And basically, this trainer was one of the trainers that would train Air Force pilots if they were able down in hostile territory, how to survive. And so very survival techniques. By the way, this picture that I'm showing now is probably one of the most iconic ones of the film. It's a good way to show real colonial times back then. One of the great aspects of this movie that we'll get to. But he did training survival skills. And so he learned with automatic weapons, shotguns, pistols, and they taught him on modern weapons first. And then they brought him down further back to where he got to the point where he was firing a musket ball. Daniel Day-Lewis did a lot of, survival training. They even got another guy who really lived like the 1800s. He was a hunter trapper who knew everything, how to skin animals, how to make weapons, how to make clothing, how to make food, and he basically taught Daniel Day-Lewis as well as a survival training specialist. And you got Captain Dye, who is famous for Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, all these other military films, out here to teach the extras and get everybody ready to be able to shoot this film. But Daniel Day-Lewis went so far as to eat different things that were cooked the way you would cook from back then, and then he would run and sleep with his rifle so that when he used his rifle, it became natural. It had a natural progression that showed up in the film. The other thing that he did was he would drink certain type of water that apparently he called cement, which was supposed to be spring water and water from back then. So he really just got into the part, which is fascinating. Another side note about that is Daniel Day-Lewis got so involved in this that he was so much Hawkeye that it took him months after this film was done for him to adjust back to normal life. That's how ingrained he was in his method acting for this role. And certainly he does a great job. Meanwhile, Mann, talking about this, he wanted authenticity. So in the authenticity, what they would do is they pick combat manuals from back then. So the combat manuals were sword fighting combat manuals. And what they did was they used them not only for the swords and sabers in this, but what they came to understand was that the essentially tomahawk combat would be similar to saber combat at the time. So they used those manuals in order to really set up their fighting one-on-one techniques, which is really cool. The other aspect of those military techniques is they trained each of the guys on how to fight, and it's basically kind of almost like a boxer, the jabs, the 1, 2, 3. The idea was fighting back then, you'd want to be able to render your opponent and disable your opponent. So your moves had to be quick, and you had to be able to go for different areas of the body, which would render your opponent unconscious. And so you see that in the fights with the way that they're using their knives, underhand, underneath, to the throat, to the head, to different areas of the body in order to render somebody completely unconscious, which is completely fascinating to me and what I really like. So a couple other things that they did here with the black powder rifle training, they actually found a guy, because there was a scene in there which Daniel Day-Lewis thought was ridiculous, is that somebody was able to reload their black powder musket and fire it while on the run. The problem with that is that too much black powder and the rifle could explode in your face. Too little and it wouldn't fire at all. So how do you get that and get the muzzle ball and get it loaded in there while running? Usually the best person would do it standing still, and it'd take at least 20 seconds. Well, there was actually a guy who was able to do it while on the run. And so they used that and learned how to do it so they could do it. It comes across great in the film, but the reality is that you didn't have a whole lot of people that would run while doing this. The wrist strength rather than the arm or shoulder strength that boarding axes or cutlasses would need is indeed interesting to study. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's very interesting. And then they also learned how to track, and you see that in the film. So one of the things that the actors learned in their survival skills was how to track animals and how to track people. They learned how to look at footprints and determine how long ago the footprint was made and what would happen. And we're seeing where Magua kind of betrays the British. One of the things about this film that makes it interesting from a historical perspective is in this scene, you have the military tactics of the British flanks. And the interesting thing about this is they got the flanks right here, and you're sitting there waiting for your commander to tell you to fire. It worked really well in the open field. When you had colonial fighting in the open fields in the North American tour areas and in Europe, hey, this was the way to go, and it was very powerful, very effective. However, in this situation where you're fighting against people that are using more unconventional techniques, kind of guerrilla warfare, it's almost useless because you're shooting into the woods at somebody you can't even see. So, pardon me. So, very interesting. So Cora was interesting because that actress kind of looked at this and didn't see a love story at first, and then as she got into it, she realized that it is a love story and a journey of self-discovery, which makes it appealable to both, a broader audience, which is really cool. Magua was interesting because he's not only seeking vengeance, but he wants to do what the Europeans did. So you see him in this. He wants to take revenge because he lost his wife and his kids to the British, but he also wants to expand his tribe to be able to earn gold and trade just like many others. 2104 Dogface is mentioning all militiamen from King Philip's War to the French and Indian War had swords, knife or axe. Pikes and steel shields were also used until the mid 1675. Yes. Pretty awesome. That's interesting. All right. So guess what they did in this movie? And this helps it look more realistic too. They actually built a real life fort. So the production team built forts, villages, and canoes, and they built mortars and cannons from scratch. So it's fascinating because I talked about Captain Dye training 30 extra soldiers, and he used other volunteers, but they built about 20 cannons and mortars. They used black basketballs for mortar shells so they could show them live and that they wouldn't do as big a damage. But the fort, village, and home sets were built from trees and bark, and they actually built it up along the river, which is fascinating because they had to build that fort to scale, and they also had to build things inside it so that they can not only house it like a real fort, but also areas where they could shoot the inside of the fort and make it more realistic from crane shots and from other shooting techniques, which is just very, very interesting. They also worked with the Smithsonian Institute on costumes, war paint, and cultures of each of the Native American tribes. And their costumes were from research and even from some paintings, which is really cool. So you'll see this initial skirmish and attack and some of the techniques. And the interesting thing about this movie also is there's a lot of fight and escape techniques to it too. The nature and landscape were an important part of this movie, and I thought it was just really brilliant how they used it. They used a lot of waterfalls around North Carolina. They used the river. Some weren't exactly what you would see in real life New York because there's a couple of scenes where you have a kind of an island out in the middle of the river that they didn't really have. So those are interesting aspects of this. Also, with the making of this movie that you saw, that's really, really cool, is they used a really large crane that was over, 30 to 40 feet up in the air. And what it would do is they'd be able to do crane shots where they can get higher views, kind of like this, and then they'd be able to scroll it down and zoom in on characters. It just was really good. Reenactors can add so much to a movie production. Period knowledge, authentic uniforms and gear, and so on. Yes, you had some reenactors that they used as well, which was really, really good. I'm glad they used those. Here's the example of one of the villages that they used. And if you look at it, wow, they built that up from scratch, which is just fantastic and fascinating, I think. I mean, my goodness, I mean, you're building all those up. So another thing that they did was they used real lighting. So for shots based in the day, you had the sunlight. It's why you also see in some of the scenes a lot of shadows and darkness because they used the daylight, and they used fire for the night as well, which was kind of cool. It made it authentic and unique. Okay, the music. So the music was very interesting. At first, they had somebody, and there's that island I was referencing a while ago. Still think that's a really pretty shot, though. I mean, look at the fire there. That's really cool. And here's kind of the attack on the fort, William Henry. So very cool. But the music was amazing. Originally, it was going to be kind of a techno based, and then they changed it. They got 2 different artists, and it actually won the Academy Award for Best Sound, which is fantastic. But it took a page from Irish folk music. Harmony is the Irish folk song that's kind of the main theme, and the song was part of the love theme. The music had Celtic bass, and it kind of just grows. And for me, the music is one of the most fascinating parts about this film. I love it. I think there's a section of about 7 to 8 minutes towards the end of the film where there's no dialogue, that it's all music, and the music just kind of drives the scene. And I love kind of the downbeats and kind of the strings on it. They wanted to make their the music help them to come alive, and they wanted to make the lives of these actors come along and the piece of history. Now, is this real? Is this fiction? It's definitely a work of fiction. All these characters are fiction. Like we mentioned, there are only a few characters that are based on real life. Now, the attack on the fort, Fort William Henry, is real, and that was a real thing that happened. So the 2 events that center around this, and we're talking about this as we kind of transition to some historical facts, there are some historical facts and details. Now, did they get everything right here? No, not exactly. Historians point out that the uniforms that the British wore were not exactly correct. You had some of the Scottish Brigade folks that were in there at the beginning, where the Mohicans lead the girls into the fort, and it's the Scottish Brigade that basically picks them up and escorts them into the fort. They weren't actually there. Fort William Henry is a must visit if in the area. Yes, it is. Now, Fort William Henry, the original was burnt to the ground, and they rebuilt it up. And I understand there's a real nice hotel out that way, but it's an interesting place to go and see, from what I understand. So this is, we see the reuniting the Monroes, and like we mentioned, the general is real. We see some of his tactics, and basically, this part of the movie is where kind of you see the seeds of the American Revolution, where he's not going to let the militia be released back to their homes, even though they had an agreement with General Webb to do that. He won't let them go. They end up defying him, and basically Hawkeye gets arrested for that. And then we see some of Magua and the French general. But let me tell you a little bit about some of this stuff. So the ambush and forest fighting is pretty historically accurate. The British quickly learned their European-style volleys did not work in defense in the forest. Now, the volleys did work rather well on the open plain. The siege of Fort William Henry is depicted realistically, down to the trench warfare, surrender terms, and the infamous massacre after the fort's fall. So essentially, the fort is surrounded, and it takes about 8 days for the French to capture the fort. Essentially, what they're doing is they're using their long-range cannons, and each day they're digging trenches to get closer and closer so they can use their shorter-range mortars to attack the fort. Shrubby 1989 says, yeah, they did use the usual Hollywood thing, pipes equal Scottish. Irish pipes sound or play differently and used differently in melodies. gets on my myself with as it really does. Yeah, definitely. Um, but the siege here and the trench warfare was interesting. So the surrender terms that we're going to get to and show, this is them arguing over the militia. We see them kind of sowing the seeds of rebellion right here. We have the love scene. And then we have, here's what the mortars looked like. The rounds of mortars. The shots on the fort. And then here's the surrender. So the terms were very, very similar. Basically, they had to leave all their extra ammo. They could bring their guns, but they couldn't take any ammo with them. They left their wounded to be treated by the French, and they marched off. They were escorted by the French. The French were supposed to take care of the wounded, but the French kind of reneged on that, and the native tribes that were with them were not happy about what happened with the surrender. And part of it is because the Native American tribes, basically, they were working for any kind of rewards or glory that they could get in battle. So you're talking souvenirs, scalps, money, anything that they could get their hands on that they could take back as spoils of war. And basically, a surrender didn't allow them to do this. So the French general was told to take, he was there because he was told to take Fort William Henry and Fort Edwards. He didn't get to Fort Edwards. He had with him about 6,000 men and 2,000 native tribes versus about 2,000 in the fort. So really, to be able to defend a fort for 7 days with 2,000 men being sieged and surrounded was pretty darn good. Obviously, one of the historically accurate pieces of this is just the showing of this siege techniques, moving your trenches forward and forward until the end of the siege. In real life, they got one message out, but really it was hard for them to get any kind of messages out because they were surrounded. Shrubby 1989 also talks about the Native Americans. They got heavy bounty money for scalps plus status in society. So yeah, can understand why they were hacked off at not getting anything. Darth Ranker also adds, yeah, this is in between soldier getting a cut of the siege or engagement to getting some ribbon on your chest. Many wanted to get paid. Absolutely, yes. And Sabrina's Espresso, who's the first one in here. Hi, how are you? Glad you're here. We're talking a little bit about the French and Indian War and how it relates to the last of the Mohicans. So anyway, there was a cut scene in here where the British do a volley on one end of the fort while one of the runners tries to get word to Webb on the other end, which is really a unique scene. It's pretty good. But as we mentioned, there was one runner that did got to Webb, and Webb really did respond that he wasn't able to reinforce Colonel Monroe's position. And essentially the terms of surrender came about because of that. They could take one cannon and their muskets, but they couldn't take any ammo. Part of the reason for this also is Montcalm couldn't really keep prisoners. He had no place to keep them. The other aspect of this was the native tribes not only didn't understand the surrender and wanted the loot and wanted glory for that, but also there was only one translator, and there were several different tribes that had different languages, and the language barrier became a problem of trying to explain the surrender and why they couldn't just go kill the British that had just come out of the fort. That's just not like them. So anyway, the Native American tribes that were with the French were interesting. At times they were uncontrollable. And despite what it shows in this movie where Montcalm says, hey, I'll be with you at the dance and at the tribal things, he would be there for customary reasons, but he did not participate in a lot of things that they were talking about and asking about. As a matter of fact, a lot of the tribes, the people in the tribes were not very ruly and not that easy to control. They fought with the French for their own glory. They often got liquored up. They would hurt and kill prisoners. They'd kill women and children. And it's just crazy. And this leads to our massacre. So the British they were really escorted by some of the French, and the French troops did nothing to help prevent this. And in all reality, this was a slaughter fest. And, a lot of these people didn't survive. Now, it wasn't as deadly as it's depicted in the movie, where only a few survived. There were about 500 or 600 that do make it back to the fort and to Webb, and one of them was Colonel Monroe. But the real massacre, you had about 1,400 survivors, no resistance. They took stuff from the British. So basically, when they were walking along, the Native Americans had already come up to them and were starting to take stuff, and then they got more belligerent and talked the end of the lines. But this is some of the battle from the movie about this real life event where they did attack these retreating British and killed quite a bit of them. What happened was they attacked the back of the lines, and without any ammo or without any ways to defend them, they just said, every man for themselves, let's get out of here, is what happened in real life. But yeah, we see how it's depicted and how they're getting away. So they get to the river and they get out. The wounded in the fort also, who were supposed to receive medical treatment from the French, they were killed, and essentially they were basically used as the trophies for the Native Americans. It's awful. So yeah, 200, anywhere from 200 to 1,400 were killed. They don't have exact numbers, but we know at least 500 survived. Historical representation of the time period was accurate here, as it showed British American. We talked about Fort William Henry. One of the other aspects about the fort is essentially he basically left it and burned it down, burned most of it out. So just a crazy, crazy time. And those are the two historical events. You got the sacking of the fort and then the massacre that happened right after it. The rest of this is just story where you've got the three Mohicans, the major and the girls, and a few others that are getting away, which I thought was a cool scene. And then they come to the cave underneath the waterfall, which I think is really cool. Then again, here's the lighting that they're trying to do. And you have the famous scene, the famous line, "Stay alive. I will find you." Basically he promises her, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's interesting. And basically, the Mohicans, they run out of powder. There's no way to defend themselves. So the Huron are going to capture them. So, I mean, the only thing that they can do is get away. And Cora eventually realizes that she's got to let Hawkeye and the rest of them go because they're the only ones that can save them. Shrubby 1989 says, fun fact about the attack on Fort Henry was the influence for Benjamin Martin and the Patriot, the retribution slaughter of the Cherokee in the South. Oh, interesting. I did not know that. That's interesting. And interesting enough, they called it Fort Wilderness, which was not the real name of the fort. But and did you guys know who Benjamin Martin's supposed to be a representative in the Patriot? What real historical figure? You guys know? I'll give you guys a minute in the chat to respond. Anybody? So Benjamin Martin and the Patriot was based upon Brigadier General Francis Marion, otherwise known as the Swamp Fox. So that's who that character was kind of loosely based on in that movie. That's another movie that I really love. That if you guys want me to ever go over it, I love Mel Gibson. I love that movie. $21 pace brain fart. Yep. So, yep, the Swamp Fox, Snorpicus Cuber. Yes, very much the Swamp Fox. Yes. So, which Walt Disney actually did a series based upon the Swamp Fox. back in the 60s. And guess who starred as the Swamp Fox? Does anybody know in that Disney series who starred as the Swamp Fox? Shrubby 1989, talking about the Patriot. It's a good movie, but it's a shitty historical piece. Inaccurate as all get out. Yes, it was inaccurate. It was cool, but yeah, too bad that movie was historical. As historical was bad. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool movie. I like the Patriot, but yeah, it's not historical at all. It's not historically accurate at all. All right, so Disney did a thing on the Swamp Fox, and the great Leslie Nielsen played the Swamp Fox. So pretty cool. Anyway, so in the movie here, we see them going after the girls. Cora gets released. The Major makes a sacrifice to the tribe, and basically Hawkeye comes in, and Hawkeye is negotiating. Basically, they were just going to release one of the girls, and Cora was going to get killed, but Hawkeye offers himself, but really the Major, who's trying to translate in French to the chief of the Huron, essentially decides to sacrifice himself, which actually makes his character more noble, gives him a good ending. So this belt is interesting because one of the things, as an adopted member of the tribe, he carries his historical record, which shows when he was adopted by Chingachgook, which I think is really cool. Let's see. There used to be a motel chain all over South Carolina named after Francis Marion. I wonder if they still exist since he has a certain reputation. Yeah, he does. And we will get into him another time, another day. But yeah, here's the translation. And then you have his brother, Uncas, and his father watching from a distance. This is where the Major sacrifices himself, and Hawkeye actually shoots him to rob them of their prize. And they take the younger daughter. Magua is going to take her as his prisoner, and she's going up the cave. And this is the best part of the movie, I think. This is the part where you have about 7 minutes where it's all music and then fighting. And Uncas goes and he's trying to save her because he loves her. There's a point in the movie where she and him have a kind of a romantic scene. Uncas fights him, and Uncas gets killed, and his body gets tossed over the falls. And then she realizes how much she loves him and doesn't see a way out of the situation. And I thought this was a really cool scene where Magua is like, he's not even using dialogue. That's what makes it so great. And he does the one, and she makes her decision. And then the awesome part where Hawkeye and Chingachgook are just catching up to him. And I love this scene where he fires a rifle, drops one, picks up a rifle that hadn't been shot, reloads on that. And then you get the famous scene between Magua and Chingachgook. And Chingachgook is he's awesome. He's a badass here. I mean, this is just phenomenal. And the music just drives this whole thing. I love this picture. Basically, Magua is pretty much defeated, and Chingachgook. And I love this like long tomahawk type weapon that he has. It's a gunstock club, very common weapon used by natives, which is pretty awesome. That is very cool. Uses it and kills him. And then you have the ending scene where he says he's the last of the Mohicans, which he's not really, but it has a good ending. And you have, Cora and Hawkeye. And then, of course, the beautiful sunset at the end. So anyway, those are the slides for the film. It's actually free on YouTube. I found it on YouTube, which is interesting, kind of cool. But let's take a look, and I'll wrap it up with what I really loved about this film. So, final thoughts. Let me say, I just love this movie. The score is just stunning. I mean, I mentioned the 7-minute sequence near the end where there's no dialogue at all, but you have all the action and the music just driving the action. Just phenomenal as they're running up the mountain. It's breathtaking. The cinematography, I felt that this film should have won an Oscar for cinematography alone. When you look at this movie and you watch it and you see all the different shots and the different angles that they make in this, it's just beautiful. And the way that they did that, making the landscape its own character of the movie, with the beautiful waterfalls, with the lush green environments, with the long shots and the close-ups. Just breathtaking. It has some interesting battle scenes where you get up and close personal fighting. I love the different scenes where you're seeing one-on-one fights with a knife and, guys going quickly 1, 2, 3. Very cool. Cold Steel Knife Company makes a modern version of the Gunstock Club. Sweet. A must-have for home defense. Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. I would say the acting is phenomenal in this. Daniel Day-Lewis is a standout actor. He's one of the greatest actors we have on the planet. I think he's great in just about everything he does. I mean, I loved him in Lincoln. Of course, he won an Academy Award for My Left Foot. He's just a phenomenal actor. But the guy who played Magua was phenomenal as well. He does a great job in this, and he's actually part Cherokee Indian. So he really brought a sense of the native people to that role, and I just love it. He's just a phenomenal villain. And the other cool thing that you get is in a movie like this, when the villain can have more to the character, more depth, but also you get the villain able to be imposing without even having to say a word. It's just phenomenal, and that's what I love about it. The balance of history and drama is good. You've got a couple of real events. While this is not by far not a historically accurate movie, you've got some historical events that are well done for the time. Now, there were some uniform issues. There were some flag issues. There were some other issues. But for the most part, it is a good representation of what life was like back then and some of the fighting techniques back then. So that's where it really shines as a historical drama. Yes, a love story between Hawkeye and Cora feels authentic, passionate, and it's kind of heartbreaking at the end. For me, it's not just a historical drama; it's a piece of cinema that makes the past feel alive. So it's great. I really like it. I really love it. Oh yeah, 2104 Dogface says, yeah, he's a Vietnam War vet too. Yes, definitely, and want to appreciate those vets. But anyway, tell me what you loved about this film. Tell me either in the chat or please tell me in the comments with this. Shrubby 1989 says Wes Study, who played Magua, is the actor's name. And yes, everything he's in is astounding. Yes, he's a phenomenal actor. I love him. I think he does a phenomenal job of bringing characters that he plays to life. And he brings a lot of his experience from, serving the country in Nam, and then also from the background of his family as well into every role he's in. So, folks, what do you like about this movie? Tell me what you like. Was there anything that I missed that I should bring up? Let me know, guys. Tell me in the chat real quick. 2104 Dogface says, it's just a great movie and must watch for any history nerd. Oh, yes, absolutely. I would say not only a history nerd, but I think it's a great movie we love. Those of you guys that watch, Doomcock's channel know we do a show called Pop Culture Breakdown every Wednesday, and we do a movie we love. And this is one that I've wanted to try and campaign for on that show that we haven't gotten yet. So it may be something we do in the future. A nice, cozy, feel-good movie. Sappy for the ladies too. Haha. Yeah, I mean, it has a love story. It has action. The other good thing about this movie is that the pacing is really good. I mean, you're into it. Boom, 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 boom. The beats are really good. So how about All Quiet on the Western Front? Yeah, that's definitely one that I'd like to do as well. Sig Valdesen wants to correct the correct title. It's Harvey Cthulhu Presents Pop Culture Breakdown. Yes. So But yeah, what do we have coming up on the channel? So, folks, with this, please leave comments after the video is played. That helps me. I need some help with my watch hours. YouTube is kind of playing little games. I only have 1,500 watch hours when I should have probably double that. So if you guys, in order to get watch hours, it's asking for interactions. So if you guys could leave some comments after watching this in the, not only in the chat but in the comment section, that'd be great. Coming up on my channel next weekend, I'm going to try and put together. I went to the Medal of Honor Museum yesterday, which is actually located near where I live in Arlington, Texas, and it's interesting. It has a lot about surviving Medal of Honor winners from the Vietnam, Korean War area, and basically the Persian Gulf War and Afghanistan and Iraq. So I'm going to tell some of those stories, show some of the pictures of that. I don't know if I'm going to do a live stream on that. I might just do a video for that. But the week after next, in 2 weeks, we'll have our pop culture breakdown for the month. And then at the end of the month, we're going to do our hits of 1975. Unfortunately, Heather L. has got a busy schedule in the next couple of weeks, so she's not going to be able to join us. That's why we're having to move the hits of 1975 out to the last week of this month. But it should be pretty good. Anyway, that's what we got coming up. Let's see. Good movie choice. I'll repost my Bearish Ambush in the comment section. Yes, please. 2104 Dogface. That'd be great. Sigvaldison said, will do. Never watched this film, but I prefer World War II history more than this era of colonial America. Yeah. Whether it floats your boat. One of the things about this film that I didn't mention is it's actually looped in with some of the Westerns because it's considered Western for where the people were at the time, and they were considered West. So they lumped this in with historical Westerns, which is interesting. And that's part of what we cover here too. We do World War II Westerns, and we do a little bit of history. We also do music and modern pop culture. So Strange Brew is a good movie about the beer wars of the 70s. Strange Brew. Funny movie. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time. Shrubby 1989 says, Sig, you double team the Chaos Warp Squid and the Emperor. You're the heretic. Oh boy. FKHC 2005, true story. It would have been 1997, I think. I visited Naval Academy Museum. As I was walking into the museum, someone who received the Medal of Honor walked out, turned to my dad and said, didn't I just see he won the medal? He received the Medal of Honor. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Phenomenal. That's cool. Yeah, they told me that Medal of Honor recipients, there are a couple of them that come back, and there's one or two of them that have apartments nearby, and I might be able to get one of them on the show if we wanted to talk to an actual recipient, which would be pretty cool. War is a Rocket, Semper Fi, USS Liberty. Thanks, Darth Wanker. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody's service that served the military. So, but anyway, guys, that's this about this wonderful book and movie. Here's the book and here's the movie right here. But check out the movie. It's great. The book's an interesting read as well. If you get a chance to read it, obviously both fiction, but they're great. FKHC 2005. How about the movie Gettysburg? Yeah, Gettysburg's a good movie too. I would love to talk about Gettysburg and the Civil War as well. And that might be something to feature on the channel as well. So anyway, Sigvaldison says, have a nice evening. The best to you and your family, Rob. Best to you too, Sigvaldison. And don't thank us for our service that came back. Thank the ones that didn't. Yes, definitely prayers for the families of those that didn't. Yes. Is it close to the movie adaptation? A little bit. They take some liberties in the movie adaptation. I think the adaptation of the movie is a little bit it's a little bit more condensed and it flows a little bit better than the book. 2104 Dogface says he's going to Gettysburg in 12 days. Darth Wanker says good night to all on the show. SP4H, thank you for being a wrench and being here. Good night, everyone. Folks, thank you so much. Hope everybody has a great evening. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you on the next one. And here's the outro.